Welcome to The Explainer. You've probably seen the headlines, right? This idea of an autism epidemic. But is that what's really going on? Well, today we're going to dig into the data to answer that one big question. Why have autism diagnoses just skyrocketed over the past few decades?
And when I say skyrocketed, I am not kidding. Just look at this. Back in the year 2000, the CDC figured about 1 in 150 kids in the US had a diagnosis on the autism spectrum. Now, fast forward just 20 years to 2020, and that number is a pretty staggering 1 in 36. I mean, that is a massive, massive jump.
So this leads us to the core question, doesn't it? Are we looking at a real surge in the condition itself? A true epidemic? Or could the answer be hiding somewhere else entirely? Maybe in the data, or even in the very way we define what autism is in the first place.
To figure this out, let's start with the numbers themselves, because this isn't some brand new thing. It's a pattern that's been building for years, and it's sparked this huge global conversation, and of course, a ton of scientific research.
The climb really started way back in the 1980s and just kept on going through the 90s and the 2000s. And it was this long, steady rise that made researchers ask, okay, what is going on here? They were basically looking at two main possibilities. Either more kids actually have autism, or we've just gotten way, way better at finding it.
And that brings us to the next piece of the puzzle. Because, the evidence overwhelmingly points to that second idea. The answer, it turns out, isn't about some new mysterious illness, but more about how we change the very tools we use to measure and understand the condition.
A really great way to think about this is astronomy. We've discovered thousands of new planets recently, right? But it's not because new planets are suddenly popping into existence. It's because we built better telescopes. Well, the same thing is happening here. It's not necessarily an explosion of new cases, it's that we've built a much better diagnostic telescope.
So what is this better telescope made of? Well, it's really a mix of 4 key things. First, the official criteria for what counts as autism got a lot broader. Second, there's way more awareness now, both for the public and for doctors. Third, we're diagnosing kids at a much earlier age. And fourth, this really interesting thing called diagnostic substitution.
Let's zoom in on that last one because it's super important. Diagnostic substitution is exactly what it sounds like. A child who, maybe a few decades ago, would have been diagnosed with an intellectual disability is now much more likely to be diagnosed with autism. And this isn't just a theory. A major study back in 2006 found that as autism diagnoses went up, diagnoses for other disabilities, like intellectual disability, actually went down by a similar amount. So we weren't finding something new. We were just relabeling it.
And you can see this so clearly when you look at how the official rulebook, the DSM, has changed. In the 80s, the rules were super restrictive. Then, boom, 1994, the DSM-4 comes out and adds new, milder categories like Asperger syndrome, which cast a much wider net. And then, by 2013, the DSM-5 just puts everything under one big umbrella, autism spectrum disorder. Every single one of these changes made it easier to diagnose more people.
Okay, so we have a pretty clear data-driven reason for the rising numbers. But we can't talk about this topic without also talking about the misinformation that's been flying around for years. So let's take a minute to separate the actual scientific facts from the fiction.
And here's the most crucial point. The source material is absolutely clear on this. The idea that vaccines cause autism has been studied over and over and over again, and it has been scientifically disproven. The original study from 1998 that kicked this all off, it was retracted because it was found to be fraudulent. The data was faked. There is just no scientific evidence supporting a link.
And beyond just the vaccine debate, other theories pointed to things like heavy metals in the environment. But just look at this timeline. The US started getting rid of environmental lead way back in the 70s. Leaded gasoline was phased out in the 90s, and thimerosal, a mercury compound, was taken out of almost all childhood vaccines by 2001. So all of these supposed triggers were being systematically removed from the environment.
So what happened to autism rates while all this was happening? Did they go down? Did they level off? Nope. They just kept climbing, faster and faster. If those things were the cause, you'd expect to see the exact opposite happen. The data just doesn't support those theories. It's a total disconnect.
So the real story here isn't simple. It's not about one single cause. It's about complexity. The complexity of how we diagnose things. And you know what? This whole situation points to a much, much bigger question that affects the entire field of mental health. Are the tools we're using even right for the job?
And that's what we're going to get into now. We're zooming out from just autism to look at all the diagnostic labels we use in mental health. And we're going to ask, are these categories actually helping us, or are they holding us back?
This quote from one of our sources just nails the problem perfectly. It says that our traditional disease categories, the buckets we put people in, like depression or schizophrenia or even autism, are now suspected of not really matching up with the actual biological causes of what's going on. They're useful shorthand, sure, but they might not be describing reality.
And that's because, and this is a key point, these labels were created to make sure doctors were all speaking the same language. The goal was reliability. So if one doctor said schizophrenia, another doctor would know exactly what symptoms they meant. But they weren't designed to be a perfect map of our biology. And as we learn more about the brain and genetics, we're seeing that these conditions are spectrums. The biological reality is way messier than our neat little labels suggest.
So, if our current system of labels has problems, then what's next? Well, this is where it gets really fascinating. Technology might offer a whole new path forward. We could be looking at the next chapter in psychiatry, and it might just be written by machine learning.
This is really the big shift. The old way was all about finding the average patient in a big group, which led to this one-size-fits-all approach. You try one thing, see if it works. If not, you try another. But the new way, powered by AI, is all about predicting what will work for you, the individual. It can sift through massive amounts of data, brain scans, genes, behavior, to find these hidden biological patterns and guide us toward truly personalized, data-driven treatments.
And one of the cool ways it does this is with a concept called a manifold. Now that sounds super complex, but the idea is actually pretty straightforward. Imagine you have thousands and thousands of data points on someone, all their genetics, brain scans, you name it. A machine can look at all of that complexity and find the few hidden patterns that are actually driving everything. It's like it can see the true biological signals that our old diagnostic boxes were completely missing.
So you can see, this isn't just some small technical update. It's a fundamental shift in how we think. This new science could have huge implications for the future of mental health and maybe even for how we understand our own identities. We're talking about redefining the mind itself.
So let's just pull this all together. What are the big takeaways? First, the so-called autism epidemic is mostly an illusion created by us getting better at detecting it and widening our definitions. Second, this whole story shows us the major limitations of our entire system of psychiatric labels. But third, machine learning is giving us incredible new tools to move past these one-size-fits-all boxes. And finally, the future is all about shifting away from labeling groups and toward truly understanding individuals. And that leaves us with one last big question to think about. If we know that our biology, our very selves, don't fit into these neat little boxes, is the goal to just build slightly better boxes? Or maybe, is it time to get rid of them altogether?